Good evening. Anti-vaccination demonstrators have stormed the streets of our capital cities today.
The biggest logistical exercise the country has ever seen today met with large protests and pepper spray. Police battled for control in Melbourne. There were arrests.
Get on the ground now!
As they stood up to the voluntary COVID vaccine. In Sydney, a far more peaceful show as protesters marched with their message.
Each and every one of you has to stand up in whatever capacity you can.
Anti-vax maniacs. Shall I say this is part one? How many YouTube videos could I make? 10, 20, 200 if I started taking on and criticizing people like Jeff Nelson here. Leaders, self-appointed leaders of the coronavirus conspiracy theory anti-vax movement.
Say we do have 100,000 deaths in the country. Remember, we get 30,000 deaths from the flu. This is going to be, we predicted from the beginning that this is going to be worse than the flu. So we'd have to at least have 30,000 deaths for it to be worse than the flu.
It is less dangerous than influenza.
But do we wait till 20,000 people die and then start panicking?
It's not going to happen.
Okay.
That's the point. It's not going to happen.
I believe you.
It's not going to happen.
In a few weeks, this is going to phase out. Is that just because there is a flu season and you expect the COVID-19 to sort of follow the same timeline as your typical flu season?
I don't expect it. I guarantee it.
These people are skeptical of political and scientific authority when it suits them, and credulous when that advances their agenda. Twice as many people with AIDS in California than with COVID in hospitals, says Jeff Nelson. But no AIDS, quote, vaccine, close quote, to profit from. There are so many bizarre false assumptions built into this. So, I mean, don't you think somebody else could say the very opposite here? Don't you think somebody could argue that there's a lot more money to be made in finding a cure for AIDS and HIV/AIDS research than in coronavirus research? Like, even if you wanted to get on board with this mentality of claiming that financial motives are shaping what's going on here, don't you think there's more than one possible perspective on this that a quick Google search could open your mind up to? No. Jeff's conclusion is, be safe and avoid any shots from convicted felon companies and lying politicians, whatever you do. Yes, because we are supposed to presume that Jeff here is telling the truth, unlike our democratically elected politicians. Watch carefully what democracy means to him as these screenshots unfold. And yeah, a quick Google search will reveal some interesting facts. In California, 136,566 people were living diagnosed with HIV in 2018. By contrast, we've only had the coronavirus circulating for about 2 years maximum at this point. 3.6 million cases within the state of California, and they are now well over 59,000 deaths. Can you imagine any reason why ordinary people, not to mention politicians, might be legitimately much more concerned about coronavirus than HIV/AIDS, just given the, shall we say, method of transmission? Somehow I don't think it's some corrupt financial motive that's driving the alarm here, Jeff. Jeff Nelson, if you don't know who he is famous for two reasons, and two reasons only. His daughters.
'Cause I got that boom boom that all the boys chase, all the right junk, all the right places.
He has twins, and he has groomed them to be performing artists since birth.
We dance every day. We've also been singing. We do school online so we can go to a ballet conservatory over in Hollywood. We're classically trained in ballet. We can tap. And salsa. And hip hop. Bust the move. You want it.
Oh man, that's their dad in the background. That's their dad.
And what comes next? Hey, bust the move.
He is what you would call a stage dad or a stage parent, a bizarre and in some ways concealed, some ways overexposed subculture within California. He didn't have his daughters go to regular school. He had them homeschooled and put them into a dance conservatory. And, growing up with crazy parents, it opens a lot of doors for you. I mean, let's face it. If they had had more sane, stable, normal parents, these girls wouldn't have had the opportunity to study singing and dance from such an early age and to become, spokespeople for their skincare line and to take up their strange position in the vegan movement. But, in other ways, of course, it's tragic to see because the eccentricity of one's parents, it opens some doors for you, but others will slam shut. They were talking about going to university, these two, going back to university, I should say, because they dropped out to pursue social media stardom some years ago. They were talking about it, and then all that talk disappeared. And to be honest with you, I think those YouTube videos disappeared. I think they delisted or deleted the YouTube videos in which they were talking about their plans and what it was they were studying. Given their educational background, given their family background, I say with all due sympathy, I imagine it would be tremendously difficult for these two to hit the books and really just get an ordinary BA. And I don't really blame them. I blame Jeff Nelson. Quote, vaccinating kids will injure and kill a significant number of them, but the profits for Pfizer and the NIH will be so enormous and ongoing, it will be pushed through. Money trumps children. I have heard this kind of reasoning from some seemingly respectable medical doctors.
The flu virus in this country is vastly more consequential, and nobody is talking about that.
This corona thing doesn't worry me at all.
It is a press-induced panic. I am angry about it. It is the flu. If you're under 65 and you get it, you're going to have the flu, and you're going to be fine.
But with the passage of time, I noticed most of them tried to backtrack and make their immoderate claims seem more moderate. There is no doubt we've seen many people who are legitimate specialists in one field of medicine completely, utterly embarrass themselves in another. So I have many times quoted this specialist on antidepressants who you see on screen. He's a guy who has many, many years of research behind him, many publications, specifically investigating and debunking antidepressants. Well, guess what? The epidemiology of coronavirus is well outside of his area of expertise. And from my perspective, he has utterly made a fool of himself. Jeff Nelson, however, I have no mixed feelings about. He's made a fool of himself in relation to coronavirus, and there is no other area of expertise that I can praise him for. Quote, Biden advisor and CNN and Washington Post health correspondent says Biden must prevent unvaccinated people from having freedoms. Yeah, that sounds like a reasonable paraphrase. He must use his power to coerce the public into taking a dodgy, quote, vaccine, close quote. Pfizer owns your media. You'll notice how fat shaming comes up in this discourse again and again. If you've been looking at other anti-vax maniacs, you might not see this as often. But something vegans like to do especially is to point out like, oh, well, how many people died because of obesity this year? So what's the real conspiracy? Isn't there a conspiracy to encourage you all to eat hot dogs and bacon when you consider the number of heart attacks people are having due to obesity? This kind of reasoning, and then presenting it as a critique of the whole establishment and status quo, one kind of craziness lends weight to another, lends impetus, what can I say? All of these things are presented as if we should implicitly trust the authority of Jeff Nelson and completely disregard the authority of not just mainstream journalists, but especially our duly elected political leaders, medical experts, scientists, so on and so forth. Quote, you just know outlets like CNN, Washington Post, the LA Times, and many others are receiving millions in taxpayer dollars to produce this fear-mongering and propaganda dreck. Point is, people with natural self-preservation instinct would never take dangerous pharmaceuticals from corrupt governments. And look who he's quoting. It's Dr. Naomi Wolf. Yes, that's right. She's a doctor, but she's not that kind of doctor. Dr. Naomi Wolf, the left wing is gradually waking up to just how stupid Naomi Wolf is and how stupid she always was. She has become a peddler of the lowest order of conspiracy theories. Quote, I hate to say it, but it's time for the opposition parties in the UK, CN, and yes, US to demand investigations into all possible ties with China, with Wuhan labs, and with Gates, tech and pharma conflicts among our elected officials. It's clear there is global treason. And oh yes, wouldn't you know it, where there's talk of treason, soon enough there's talk of violent revolution and even guillotines in the streets. Quote, government stealing all your tax money to give to their associates and then locking you up. At what point do people realize this is why the guillotine was invented? Close quote. It never occurs to Jeff Nelson that if we were to return to the first principles of the French Revolution, if the revolutionaries were to get out the guillotines, that Jeff himself might be the sort of person to find his head on the chopping block. This reminds me of fascists who, when they fantasize about a new regime, they just presume that they will be a leader and they won't be one of the people downtrodden by it. Also leftists, when they fantasize about violent revolution, they seem to just assume that they will have choice and discretion over who ends up on the guillotine. Jeff Nelson again, quote, U.S. foreign policy is basically piracy. Biden has picked up where Obama left off with the greedy, murderous military activity cloaked in propaganda. Close quote. Now you can see from this statement that Jeff's relationship to both the mainstream left and mainstream right in American politics is tenuous and difficult to summarize. It's somewhat painful for me to see this statement from John Pilger, whom he's quoting here. Pilger is a fool and an ignoramus and always has been. However, he did publish a number of important things about Cambodia back when so few journalists were covering Cambodian politics that almost anyone who did so ended up publishing material of very real historical importance. I kind of like John Pilger, but he's a complete imbecile. And John Pilger is providing you a link to thegrayzone.com, where you can find yet more insane posturing and preaching about U.S. foreign policy. Oh yes, and who are they blaming here? Big surprise, Israel. Quote, do not believe this kind of corporate sales BS published by the media outlet that lied us into the Iraq war. Keep kids and adults away from this toxic garbage unless you hate them. You see how in his mind, the anti-war message and the conspiracy theory message blaming the media for past decisions in U.S. foreign policy, this is all part of the snowball effect of more and more self-righteous, uncritical thinking. In some strange sense, in his mind, there's a dotted line that links his opposition to the Iraq war to his opposition to the use of vaccines. Quote, CNN and Pfizer want you to believe COVID was the third leading cause of death. It wasn't. A bogus test screwed up statistics and made heart attacks, strokes, car accidents, and cancer into, quote, COVID deaths, unquote. Relax. It's a bad flu year. That's all. Quote, California is still under a stay-at-home order today, but no one is paying attention, no matter their political party. Everyone knows flu season is over and there's zero danger. Lockdown is just one political party acceding to vaccine industry demands. Close quote. And so, in sum, it was all just one big, crazy conspiracy. Jeff Nelson, terrible parent, terrible YouTuber, terrible leader and influencer on the vegan movement. If you would like to see more videos in this ongoing series, Anti-Vax Maniacs, give it a thumbs up, share the link, tell your friends, give me a phone call. See you in the lineup to get the vaccines, whatever. The really good news about Nina and Randa is that they finally went back to school. At the time when they published their book, The Clear Skin Diet, not too long ago, They still boasted that they dropped out of school to pursue their social media career, their social media stardom. And, you know, when you read what it is they have to say as they struggle to put their thoughts together, I think you really see the harm that's done to them. Yeah, I do find it a little strange to see them dancing in very revealing attire with their father in the room. I found it very strange when they put out that music video recently, the Duck Boy music video recorded entirely with their father in the room. There are a lot of things I find strange, you know, about their lifestyle choices. And I think the path they got on in terms of modeling and acting, I think it has stunted their growth, both mentally and physically.
My slang is editorial, explicit material, briefcase show, live and stereo flow, feel me.